Welcome to the Condé Nast Traveller Dine Drink Festival, a special event where we are chatting with the best in the business about all things food. I am Shraddha Shahani, the Junior Features Editor at Condé Nast Traveller India. The pandemic has certainly changed the way we look at and consume food. 2020 was the year we went back to our grandmother's age-old recipes. According to Google Trends, the search for the recipe of the immunity-boosting kadha reached a record high in April 2021. We became more creative and learned to spotlight unglamorous ingredients in the kitchen and turn them into heroes. We swapped avocados and pak choy with locally available and humble ingredients like the arbi and parvat. From sustainable kitchen practices to regional cooking, the joys and benefits of the Indian kitchen came to the fore like never before in the past 2 years. Moreover, we started to understand the importance of healthy eating on our mental well-being. But as the world begins to bounce back, will we continue to eat locally, sustainably, and mindfully like we did during the lockdown? Today, I'd like to invite executive chef, TV show host, and cookbook author Ranveer Brar. Ranveer is known for highlighting ancient cooking techniques and sustainable practices from across India. Traditional remedies and healthy cooking are a big part of his food philosophy. I'd also like to invite Shayamal Vallabhjee, a sports scientist, motivational speaker, author, and performance coach. Shayamal has worked as a performance coach for various well-known athletes from Tanya Mirza to Mahesh Bhupathi. He has often brought to light the importance of good food for a healthy mind. Welcome and thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, thank you very much.
Pleasure being here, Shraddha.
Ranveer, you've been cooking up a storm on Instagram lately. You've gained over 1 million followers with your relatable cooking tips and hacks. I was just wondering, are there some principles or hacks that you still carry on from your grandmother's kitchen?
I think most of my career has been spent unlearning what they taught me in the hotel schools. So I'd say I've been cooking for 25 years. I learned for 5, implemented it for another 5, was proud of what I implemented for the next 5, and the last 10 years have just been able to try to unlearn whatever I learned along the way and go back to why my grandmom used to say so. And I think that, and I think almost all chefs, we do this unlearning bit. Almost everything that your grandmother used to say, yeah, it is like this because it is like this, had a reason, which was definitely not, it is like this because it is like this. And I think the last 10 years as a chef have just gone into figuring out what those reasons were, and I think the beauty of our ancient culinary wisdom is that it's cause and effect. Just because it happens, you have turmeric, it is good for you, it stops there. Or you have, you have honey and ginger, and it is good for you in the winter, it is good for you. You see the effect and you believe it. And that's why you don't need rationale, you don't need science, you don't need logic. And most grandmoms, you just passed it down like, it is good just because it is good. And I think everything that I do is just figure out why she said so. Never question it. Just figure out why she was saying so. Yeah. So a lot of I speak to her almost every day. I mean, I lost her when I was 5, but I still speak to her almost every day.
Are there any specific principles that you find yourself going back to all the time?
Yeah, I think a few principles that she taught us basically were kitchen values that translated across. One was the longer it takes, the better it tastes, and that's usually the case. And the second was you really can't rush it even if you want to. Another one was when you're looking, you're not cooking. That impatient kid who always keeps opening the lid and say, she used to say this, "Putter jata vekhla, ja pakala." Either you look or you cook. You can't do both. Yeah. So yeah, lots of. I think that's a lot of that.
Those are some really, really helpful tips. I know I keep opening the lid while I'm cooking, so I try to keep this in mind. Talking about principles, you've often stressed about eating seasonally and locally. I know you've grown up doing that. What role does that play on our health?
I think they say Anna Para Brahm. We are what we eat, and it is not just we. Our ancestors live through us from their knowledge of what they ate. When you say everything you eat becomes a part of you, it became a part of them, and it's living through us. And hence, it's very important to understand that, respect their wisdom, and respect the wisdom that is there in our genes.
Thank you so much, Ranveer. I couldn't agree more. Food does not just affect our health, but also our mood. Shayamal, you've spoken about how a healthy mind is the secret to everything, and a healthy mind is a byproduct of healthy eating. There's a clear science between the mood and the gut. Could you explain what the connection is, please?
Yeah, thank you, Shraddha, for inviting me. Listening to Ranveer chat is, he's not a chef, he's a scientist, because I come from the world of science, and the premise around the world of science is to question the answers. Don't answer questions, question the answers. Disprove what is proven, challenge status quo. Go deep into understanding the building blocks of why we're doing something. And you can see he's a scientist masquerading as a chef, using molecular biology in terms of food nutrition. So it's really powerful. And listening to him about intuitive unlearning, as a scientist, I have so much to ask, and I'm hoping he'll come back and talk about that. I'm fascinated about when you intuitively unlearning, Ranveer. What is the process of recognizing what your body doesn't necessarily understand or accept versus what science says is actually good? So I'm talking about maybe a food intolerance or a food allergy that, doesn't really feel good with you in your experimentation process, but science says this is good. As a scientist, is there a gap with how you transition over that? Or in intuitively unlearning and intuitively relearning, are you so connected to how you feel that you bring your neurobiology and physiology into your cooking with respect to how you feel? So you can come back with that. Ranveer said something really powerful. He says, we are what we eat. And as a scientist, I'm going to take that a little deeper. We're not what we eat. We are what we digest. Right now, this is deep science coming in, because what our gut is filled with is gut microbiome, bacteria, millions, trillions. We are actually bacteria. That's it. And, some scientists even go to the extent to say that, they are not helping us. We exist to help them survive, because for hundreds of millions of years, the bacteria have survived and we have come and gone. Different species have come and gone. So bodies of animals are there to help the existence and the flourishing of bacteria. Okay. So when I say you're a byproduct of what you eat, that means that you could put something healthy into your body, but if you do not have the gut microbiome to break it down, you're not getting the nutrients that are absorbed in it. Okay. So it's really fundamentally important for us to understand what our body can break down, because the nutrients that we talk of, when we say something's got healthy oils or something's got certain vitamins in there, those vitamins need to become bioavailable in the body through your bacteria for them to actually help it. Now, we speak a lot about that gut microbiome link. What is happening between the gut and your brain? Now, that linkage is very crystal clear. And the reason why it's crystal clear is because food goes into your tract. It has to be broken down into the tract before it gets into your bloodstream, goes back up, and affects the 4 driving chemicals in the brain that perceive how you show up. This is the relationship between the gut and the brain. There's a beautiful research that showed that was done at a university, where they asked someone, hey, listen, you got $100, and some stranger is going to walk into the room, and they're going to ask you, we're going to split this money, and they only offer you $10. And now you've got a choice. You can either accept it or you can choose to reject it. Now, before people got into this room, they fed them 2 diets. They fed them a carb-rich diet and they fed them a protein-rich diet. Okay, and they noticed that those who had a carb-rich diet rejected the $10. Right? Those who ate a protein-rich diet, right, understood that even though I got less, I got something. They were able to process that logically. Okay? And they found that protein increases tryptophan in the body and tyrosine, and these are precursors to dopamine, which allows you to think into the future. But here's what's scary, that this shift in decision making happened within 25 to 30 minutes of eating a meal. And that's what I keep telling people, that your food is not just how you grow, it's how you show up in the world every single day, which is why we need to be so conscious. And I'm going to throw it back to you and Ranveer, and we can go into really ancestral wisdom and eating like how our grandmother said, because he's onto the perfect thing. And I would love to just peel that away.
Actually, that's a great segue into my next question, but I am going to get back to that in a bit. Ranveer, you've grown up eating healthy consciously. What we call the farm to fork approach has been a practice you've championed for years now. So what's your biggest learning from the Indian kitchen?
So a few things that I learned, like Shayamal said, intuitively, never really bothered to sort of put much thought behind it, was most of the times, stuff that nature was not forced to grow was the tastiest. That essentially was one thing that I learned. For example, there are these water canals, right, between the farms. And there are these really small cherry tomatoes that randomly grow, on the edges of these water canals. The tastiest tomatoes that I've ever sort of had. And you're not forcing them. They're not, you're not saying, I'm going to plant these seeds and they're going to grow. You're not putting fertilizers, you're not putting... And I think that that bit is very, very important to understand, that you need to understand that the ingredient that you're working with cannot be forced to grow to that size, come to that size. So my learnings has been that when an ingredient comes to you, you should be able to understand that it's not forced to be the way it is. And we spoke up in a big way about ingredients that are not perfect and the beauty of the ingredients that are not perfect. And, I've worked with a lot of organizations on these ugly is good sort of ingredient movement, because the more perfect it is, the more chances of it being forced to become that perfect, either via genome sequencing or via fertilizers, pesticides, or chemicals would be. And hence, perfection is not something to look for as a chef. You should look for it in your cooking. And we should not force perfections on ingredients. Something that the world's now learning. I'm sure Shayamal will add more to it. There's an entire ugly food movement in the US, which dissed the amount of wastage, up to 30% wastage that is happening because supermarkets wanted equally sized, perfect pears and apples that would fit into crates, which would be easy to transport, and the smaller ones or the ones that wouldn't fit into that crate or that size would have to be thrown away. And hence, so again, I think don't always look for perfection in your ingredient. If it's too perfect, it has been forced to be perfect. If it's forced to be perfect, it is not how it is supposed to be. Nature is random. Accept randomness in your ingredients. Try and bring perfection in your cooking. I think that's sort of what I was getting at. Now, to answer Shayamal's question that he threw at me earlier in terms of intuitive unlearning, I think what happens is, and all of us do that, we get these tools via our education, whether we are scientists or whether we are doctors, we get these tools to understand the world. However, after a point in time, we feel tools aren't enough to express, and expression also includes the intangible. Expression also includes the unsaid. So while all the said is in the books and the libraries that we've gone to, the unsaid, the effect is where the real fun is. And I think in our arcs of careers at some point in time, when expression becomes more important than education, all of us then turn to listening to our gut and believing that we are all connected. We are all connected in this giant mind cloud. And if it is good for me, mostly if I'm feeling it, mostly people will feel it too. Because whether you call it we connected with our guts, or we connected with our ideas, or we connected through genes, And at that point in time, when you're intuitively unlearning, you learn to trust your gut. You learn to believe that what's good for you probably has been good for a lot of others. And then you sort of start taking that direction.
It's so good to hear a chef saying ugly is good. It's really nice to hear that. Sorry, Shamal, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was saying, he's hit the nail on the head. The ugly is good movement is growing quite rapidly around the world. And I mean, you just see it, it's in our life every single day, is that, look at our Instagram, for example. You look at Instagram, you're seeing Instagram is forcing a level of perfection on you that is not in alignment with who you are. It's forcing you to look a certain way, and look at the impact of mental health that it's had on you, right? So anything that's forced to look a certain way is obviously going to be really, really bad. And Ranveer is touching on a really powerful point, which is tuition and being connected to your body. And I just want to tell everyone that for you to truly be connected to your body, you have to live in alignment with what comes from the earth in its most natural form. If you're eating things that you do not recognize, there's no way you can live in alignment. There's no way your mind, your body, your soul can become aligned. Why? Because something that cannot be recognized by the way you look at it and cannot be recognized by the body is working incredibly hard to detoxify it and get it out of there. And it's operating in malalignment. It's actually denaturing your entire cell biology. When something is in you that it does not recognize, the process is no more. The mind and body are no more working on how to come into alignment. It's spending all its energy on getting it out of there, right? So if you truly want to live an intuitive life, if you want to feel your food, if you want to be mindfully present, you have to eat it in its most naturally recognizable form. And you have to eat it in the season that it's actually being produced. That's the secret. And right now, some people are asking, how do you do that? And quite honestly, I think you have to do your research, because some things are available just throughout the year, and you just don't know when's a good time and when's a bad time. And I remember, as a scientist, I tell people that sometimes, eating frozen vegetables is healthier than eating fresh vegetables. Why? Because something was cut young and it was ripened in the transport process. But if something is frozen, it was cut ripe, the nutrients are locked into it through cryo-freezing, and it's coming to you fully rich and fully this. So there are ways in which you got to do it. But I think the secret to what Ranveer is trying to also tell us is that, you have to be mindfully present. If you're not mindfully present, you're going to make a lot of decisions, thousands of decisions on a day-to-day basis, that's going to move you further away from intuition, further away from alignment. There's no shortcut to healthy living. There's no shortcut to intuitive eating and feeling your way into this world. It requires presence of mind. It requires attention. It requires awareness. It requires you to be present and take part of this journey of healing and feeling.
That is exactly what I was coming to right now. So I read this book about the gut and mind connection. And it basically said that we very often eat according to our emotions. When we're happy, we tend to eat something. When we're sad, we tend to eat something unhealthy. So could you tell us a bit about how to train the mind to eat right?
Yeah. What you said is really powerful, because eating in association with emotion has become cultural. Every time something good happens, we celebrate. How do we celebrate? We celebrate with alcohol and we celebrate with sugar, right? That's how it's been happening, right? Our great-great-grandfathers never celebrated with these two things. They celebrated with organic eating, They made a very, very healthy meal and everyone sat down together. It wasn't about how much alcohol was consumed, neither was it about how big the cake was, right? So we've moved away from that. I come from Africa. Most people think in Africa, there was a lot of meat being consumed by Black African tribes. That is the furthest thing from the truth. They are they're making decisions that are in alignment with family, community living every single day. And I'll give you an example. Someone has a little chicken running around in their house. They have to make a decision. We can have roasted chicken or some chicken today as a meal. If we leave that chicken's going to get an egg. When you get an egg, you can have a decision. I can make an omelet, which only one person can eat and probably not be satisfied, or I can nurture that egg. That egg will now become a chicken. At later stage, that will feed an entire family, right? They're not eating meat every day, right? Because why? If you sacrifice an animal, right, that meat has a shelf life, which means you need to have enough people to feed that before it actually goes off. They're making decisions that are in alignment with how food grows and how many people will consume it. right? So there's a misconception. And I think the biggest problem we have right now is that our food has become too easily available. So we take it for granted. No one understands the amount of effort and time that goes into it. And there's this very powerful story I read once about it was just a simple image, a man sitting and praying on a little mat. Okay. And the story goes that for that man to do his prayer every single day on that mat, right? How many farmers had to grow this material? Where did this material have to go? How many weavers had to dye this material before it was weaved in it? That man's process of just praying for 5 minutes was the work and effort of more than 100 people to get that into place. Now, if you start thinking about that, you start becoming more intuitively present with every single decision that you do. And I think that is the secret to everything. We're talking about intuition, and I'll tell you, I started working with professional athletes, and I was very, very big into supplementation. I was testing and giving them all sorts of supplements. Everything was inorganic, and the body was not recognizing this. I knew this, but I knew no other alternative. And then I started living life about 8 to 10 years ago, exactly like what Ranveer said. And I hate the biohack. Everyone seems to use this trendy word called biohack. I said hack is shortcut, right? You cannot create a shortcut for your cell biology. It's arrogance, it's ego that makes us think that our little intelligence that's 100,000 years old can find a shortcut to the cellular intelligence that's existed for 1 billion years. That's just arrogance, right? We have to make decisions that bring us into alignment with how it functions. Because if we don't come into alignment, they are not going to be sacrificed. We are going to be sacrificed. Okay, so I started moving into this very, very beautiful way. And I think everyone needs to try to do this, is you biohack the body using the 5 elements. That's earth, fire, air, space, and water. And I'll keep it very, very simple. Earth is eating plant-based foods. That's what you need to do. Foods that come out of the earth, right? That's earth-based foods. The second is fire. Fire is absorbing the energy of the sun. We can absorb it. That's vitamin D. But who does a better job of absorbing it is actually mushrooms and plants. So one way of absorbing the earth's energy is take your food, right? And leave your fresh vegetables out in the sun anywhere between 10 a.m. in the morning and 3 p.m. for about 30 to 40 minutes. Yes, it'll lose a little water, it'll shrinkle up a little bit, but it's absorbed really powerful sun's energy in there. If you don't cook it too much, you can absorb that energy as well. The third is water. People seem to think we need to drink water, but actually the formula for ancestral living is you need to eat 60% of your water. That means you need to eat foods that release water when they're cooked. And I'm going to throw it to Ranveer to talk a little bit more about that. But if you can eat 60% of your water and drink 40%, then you will stay fully hydrated, because the releasing of water happens over a slower period of time, and the body needs that time to become hydrated. Space is fasting. The one common thing in every single religion in the world, in every single practice, is fasting, right? Fasting is the way for detoxification of your body. I come from a Gujarati family, so we practice Ekadasi twice a month. Okay, Ekadasi is fasting, right? Every single religion has it. Christianity has Lent and so many other practices, right? Fasting is how you detoxify the body. If you do not detoxify the body, you're not going to give it an opportunity to live intuitively and come into alignment. Okay, and air is just what we've been speaking about for the longest time. Pranayama, breath work. Use your breath, right, to bring your doshas into alignment, to balance your body. A balanced body will be able to feel whether an ingredient is actually sitting in you properly. When you start doing all of this, that link between gut and brain is a non-essential link because it's already in existence. The problem is, what I want to tell people is, don't find a shortcut. Don't say, I need to do this to now connect my gut to my brain. I tell runners as well, you don't need to do this to connect your foot to your core, which is essential for posture. Foot is already connected to your core. We've done everything to disconnect it, right? But if you live in its natural way, it will be connected. If you eat in your natural way, your body has already got hundreds of millions of years of intelligence in it to establish that connection. All you need to do is don't break it. Don't worry about how to reconnect. The connection's already done.
Those are some really, really helpful tips. Thank you so much. Cindy, do you want to add to that?
No, I think it's very powerfully put. kudos to you, Shayamal. I think you've been able to, articulation is definitely a strong suit. And I think you've been able to articulate it beautifully. The only thing that I'd probably talk about it is just one, because we spoke about mindfulness and eating and how things already exist, and we've worked really hard to sort of, break the chain. So I was having a conversation with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he said, somebody said mindful eating, and he started laughing. He's like, "What are you telling Indians about mindful eating?" He's like, "For 3 meals, we eat 9 times a day." And he's like, I was like, "How's that?" He's like, "You wake up first thing in the morning, in your mind, you run through the breakfast and how you're going to have these beautiful parathas, and you're already eating. You've eaten in your mind. Your mind is ready for breakfast. Then you have that meal. That's the second time you eat it. And the third time is when you're telling your friends about what this beautiful paratha your mom made, or when you go to your mom or your family member and say, this was beautiful. I really like this, and this." As Indians, we are supposed to be the most mindfulest of eaters. The point is, mindfulness is in our culture. We just need to sort of say that, let us come back to equilibrium. So we are doing it the way we are doing it, And I'm sorry, I don't want it to become an Instagram bashing forum, but the day you leave your phone to click a picture or to put it after you've eaten, that's when real mindfulness will start setting in. That's when, you're going to consume the dish. Your entire body is going to consume it. All your senses are going to consume it. Not the rush of posting a picture, or not the rush of, putting it out there. And I think it's probably just connects to the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, Ranveer, you've hit the nail on the head. What you're saying. Remember, I remember reading an article where this restaurant, they kept getting complaints where the food was cold, in London. So they said, this is interesting. We've never had this, and it's a recent trend. So they put cameras to study it, and they found that 60% of the food was sent back to be warm because people were taking pictures of it, right? As opposed to, 10, 15 minutes went to just taking this picture, and obviously it got cold in there. And I think you're 100% right. His Holiness the Dalai Lama is really one of the most compassionate, warm, loving souls. He's there. And he's so powerful in his wisdom in terms of how he said it. You're so right. We are mindful in it, And your question earlier on, Shraddha, was about emotions. And Vedic wisdom says something really powerful. It says, do not eat when you are angry. And I just remembered that while you were speaking. We eat when we're happy, we eat when we're angry. And when you're angry, your body's cortisol is really plummeting out the roof. Cortisol is the body's flight and fight hormone. It's what's secreted in your body when you were running away from a threat. Now, there's no threat. You're just stressed, or you're angry because you're perceiving a threat. And your body's digestive system completely shuts down when cortisol is present in the body. So eating when you're angry is the worst thing you can do. Eating when you're anxious or eating when you're depressed is the worst thing that's what's driving your blood sugar levels up and your obesity up. So with respect to our emotions and how we do that, really, it requires you being presence of mind, understanding what mental space am I in when I'm consuming this food, right? And I think Ranveer and His Holiness is saying it beautifully, that yes, we are mentally in the process of preparing our meal, then consuming our meal, then talking about our meal. The problem may be that when we are consuming it, right, we try to do 20 things at the same time. We're trying to take a picture on Instagram. We try to be on Zoom. We're trying to watch the stock markets go up and down. And then your share just drops and all of a sudden you're eating, panicking. Or the second thing is you've not planned that meal. You've not carved out 30 minutes in your calendar to eat peacefully. So as a result, you're playing catch up. The number of CEOs that I coach who are playing catch up on their food every single day is insane. No regulation of time when they eat. There's no regulation of meals. They're trying to do it in the 5 minutes between they have this call or that call. They're actually trying to get off a call 5 minutes so they can shove something down their throat before the next call. You must understand that without mindfulness, we're not going to do justice to anything. To the people we are talking to, the people we're trying to listen to, the meeting we're in, or the food that we're eating. And I think that's the message Ranveer and His Holiness are trying to give us, is that really presence of mind can alter everything, can bring us back into alignment.
Okay, so mindfulness is basically the key, right? Samit, you were saying something earlier about how we don't appreciate a lot of ingredients around us. And there are all these kind of fad diets where people are sort of replacing wheat with quinoa and other ingredients that are not very readily available. So Ranveer, I just wanted to ask you, what do you have to say about that?
I think we're just spoiled as a civilization. We are at a time when everything's in abundance. We're just spoiled for choice. We're spoiled for variety. Eating seasonal also comes with the responsibility of dealing with monotony of the same ingredient. Being bored is such a thing in today's society that, while in monsoon, that you will probably just have these 8 vegetables. So we know that in a particular season, we're going to have these 7 or 8 vegetables, and that's all that is going to be there for the next 3 months. And we're not used to that. We're not used to not having a lot of choice. And that becomes one of the reasons why we have these shifts towards finding a solution in something that is a fad diet or something that is, we look at a fad diet as a solution to the lack of variety, which is exactly diagonally opposite of why they even exist.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we need to deal with instinctively first. We need to deal with the boredom or our feeling of boredom that might come with handling a certain set of ingredients over a certain period of time. There's going to be repetitiveness, but that is the beauty of it. If nature wanted you to have 20 things in summer, it would have put 20. If it wanted to have 30 in winter, it would have put 30. The reason it is put 10 is because those 10 are good for you. Trust it, go with your gut, as they say, and go for it. ये बोरियत जो है ना, ये बोरियत ने बड़ा काम खराब किया. For example, India, right? We suddenly we were a country that never heard of allergies. We grew up eating wheat as a country. All North Indians were like, no, we've been eating wheat forever. What is this gluten allergy? And suddenly everybody is now talking about a gluten allergy because we forgot that along with the wheat, we also ate bajra ki roti one day, jowar ki roti one day. And the wheat that we ate wasn't as white as it was. Our obsession with white, that's a different conversation altogether. And that, I think, is something that we miss. Or simply, we are all milk drinkers in the North. What is this lactose allergy? And suddenly you have lactose allergies. Because you were not just consuming milk, you were also consuming a lot of chas, dahi, lassi, lactic acid, which is not lactose. And I think that is something that we've forgotten. We've tried to make our life too simple. And I always say a lot of it is advertising, whether it is Pio Glass Bhar Doodh as an advertisement or, and I think what we need to understand is overconsumption is something that is absolutely diagonally opposite again to diversity. We were never, as a country, we always made sure that in every part of the plate, things wouldn't get repeated. Bhai jawar hai, to bajra bhi hona chahiye, gehu bhi honi chahiye. Suddenly, when you say it's all gehu in my diet, and why is my body reacting like this to wheat? We are not Indians, we are wheat eaters. It doesn't work like that, And I think that's a very important message that Shayamal is giving us here. That, diversity and overconsumption stand diagonally opposite to each other. If you're looking at ancient wisdom and your genealogy, look at it in completion. Don't look at it for convenience.
Shayamal, just to wrap up, I'm sure everyone is looking at New Year's
resolution. It's the unlearning,
Shayamal, I'm sure everyone is looking at New Year's resolutions. So how can one prepare for a healthier gut and an improved mood? What are some of the do's and don'ts and foods you should include in your diet and not include in your diet?
Yeah, Shraddha, I know. This is the interesting time of the year, isn't it? When everyone sets up their resolutions. And by the way, statistically, 50% who put a resolution don't get past the 15th of January. Interesting. And that's proper science. I think there are a few things. I mean, Ranveer gave us really some powerful advice, And one of the biggest things we want to eliminate, and I was thinking about this as he was speaking, was, as a scientist, we tell people, eliminate vegetable oil. Vegetable oil is super high in polyunsaturated fats, which is a double bond, which drives your cardiac disease, your body's things. It's so manufactured that your body cannot recognize it. It completely denatures how your cells work. So if you can just eliminate your vegetable oil from it, you would sort out a lot of your body's inflammation problems. And inflammation is the first thing we want to reduce in our body. And the reason I'm saying this is because I was listening to him speak just now about recognizing the ingredients, and something popped into my mind. Almost every Indian household, if you ask them, make a tub of ghee, they know how to do it. Every single household will know how to get. Ask anyone to make vegetable oil. Nobody knows. Not a single person knows how to make vegetable oil, because the process of extracting that oil is so intoxicated and industrialized that we have no idea what to do to get it. Really, we have no idea. And that is about starting to ask these questions about intuitively. If you recognize it, I think he has given us the most beautiful gem that we could get. If you can recognize the process, if you can recognize the ingredients, it will be good for you. And in science, we say what is good for the heart is good for the brain as well. So staying to your question. And to everyone moving forward, you want to control two things for longevity. You want to control the amount of inflammation in your body, and you want to control something which we call glycemic variability, which is the spikes in your sugar. Okay, these are the two things you need to control. You control that, you will live happy and healthy for a very, very long period of time. The number one contributor for inflammation in the body is our vegetable oils. Okay, so when you listen to your body and you remove certain things like vegetable oils, then what will happen is the inflammation will completely reduce. He spoke about turmeric or curcumin earlier. Curcumin is also a very, very beautiful anti-inflammatory, which as Indians, we put in all our food. So we're getting it in microdoses every single day, right? I love his simple, minimal ingredient thought process. I think it's extremely powerful in there. And it may mean making a decision on what are the 3 or 4 ingredients I want to put in here. What are the unnecessary things that I've been told needs to go in here versus what is needed to go in here. That's the scientist mentality that every cook needs to come in. Oh, my granny said do this, or my mother said do this, or this chef said do this, and there's a whole host of things. But what can I reduce? How can I reduce to maintain certain flavors in there? And I'm a big believer in minimal cooking, because the more you put in there, the more you lose the essence and the flavor of the core ingredient or the core vegetable in there. Okay, glycemic variability is the spikes in sugar that we keep getting. And there are a lot of things you can do, right? For example, you can go on a simple walk after you eat, and that mild to moderate exercise will create enough energy in the body to start flattening that glucose curve. There's simple hacks that we can do. For example, if you chew a cardamom just before food, it'll also suppress the glycemic variability in the body. These are completely natural things. There are other things like eating cinnamon. Cinnamon powder is very, very beautiful. A teaspoon of cinnamon in warm water or apple cider vinegar. I'm trying to give you one ingredient hacks. Apple cider vinegar, cinnamon, cardamom. Chewing these 10 minutes before you eat food will completely suppress your glycemic variability. All of these things are the way we need to do. If you can reduce inflammation and glycemic variability, you live long, happy, healthy. And going into 2022, when you're setting resolutions, don't set complex resolutions. The body can only remember one thing. And we need to stick to one thing for the entire year. Not for 30 days, not for 60 days, not for 100 days. You need to stick with it for life. That's the secret. So pick one thing that you want to eliminate or one habit that you want to change. Don't make it something that's so difficult that you're not going to be able to sustain. And be kind to yourself. I think the secret with resolutions is to be kind to yourself and don't break the chain. The most successful comedian in the world is Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld clocked $267 million in the middle of the 90s when no one else was doing that in a single calendar year. And how he did it, he came up with this beautiful theory called don't break the chain. And his chain was that for me to be successful as a comedian, I need to write every single day. And he took a big calendar out there, and every day that he wrote, he put a big X in. And after a week, he had 7 X's in a row, and his entire mantra in life has been don't break the chain. Now, sometimes it becomes incredibly difficult to not break the chain. So I tell people, don't break the chain, but don't make a chain of inconsistencies as well. Which means if you didn't do it today, don't not do it tomorrow. Right? You don't want the chain of not doing it to get longer than the chain of doing it. So even if it's a break, start the next chain the next day. I said, be kind to yourself, that sometimes you're going to have a gap and you can just look past that, right? But keep that chain going. And that's the secret.
Thank you so much, Ranveer and Shayamal. It was lovely chatting with you both. This conversation has been so insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Christmas is just around the corner, and Ranveer has very kindly offered to show us his recipe of an Indian spiced gingerbread hot chocolate. Ranveer, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shraddha. So the idea was, how do you bring in ancient wisdom to something as modern as a hot chocolate, right? And our ancient wisdom has a lot to do with spice mixing. So what I thought was, let's look at the gingerbread spice again. Let's look at the gingerbread spice. Let's look at how could we treat it with a little bit of Indianness, considering our surroundings are different. It's not usually as cold in most of India. And how do we balance the spices to create an Indian gingerbread spice? How do we create a hot chocolate solution for that? And that was the objective. Let's start with the spices first. So here's my spice box. Alright, so there are a lot of spices that go into the gingerbread spice mix. I'm going to take that gingerbread spice mix and then I'm going to translate that the Indian way. Let's use this tray for now to show you the spices. Cinnamon, again, very, very important. Shayamal spoke a lot about cinnamon and how it balances the glycemic index of our body. How we can avoid these glycemic spikes through cinnamon. Chilies for the heat. Star anise. Now, star anise, whether it's India, Asia, China, star anise is considered great one for cooling your body. So while you're putting a lot of warm spices in your gingerbread spice mix, you also want to put in some cooling spices. While the warm spices are great for winters, for the digestion, it's also important to balance it with some cooling spices. Then we have the cloves, mace. You can also add nutmeg. I always add a little bit of black pepper. Another good ingredient to add, which I usually add here, is coriander. Again, amazing for the gut, great for Indian conditions where it's not too cold in Christmas. And fennel seeds. Fennel seeds are again a fantastic addition because cools the gut down, balances the body. Great addition to milk because you're going to be making a hot chocolate with milk in it. So it's a fantastic addition to milk. And then you take all of them and you grind them into a powder. And then when you've ground them into a powder, because it's gingerbread spice, you add dried ginger powder, commonly known as salt, right? And this is more or less an Indian condition suited gingerbread spice mix. You could add the aromatic spices, for example. You could then balance between star anise and cinnamon, add them a little more. If you feel you like the floral aromas a lot more, you could do that. That primarily goes into the blender, gets ground. While grinding, I put a little bit of salt, and this is what we get. This right here is what we get. So this, the beauty of this gingerbread spice mix is that while it is taken from a tradition of Europe, and this tradition is, if I remember correctly, around 2400 BC in Greece is when the gingerbread was first supposed to have been made, right? And the idea of calling it gingerbread was because ginger and other spices were so expensive that people could afford it only on special occasions, and they would make bread of it that would stay for months. So they could taste those spices over and over again. Fortunately, like we discussed earlier, we live in a world of abundance, and we don't need to preserve our bread for like months and months and months in order to taste the spices. But that is why most gingerbread that we have is made in a way where you actually boil the sugar because you want the gingerbread to stay on for longer period of time. And that's why gingerbread as an ingredient, as gingerbread spice or gingerbread as a dish is supposed to stay for longer, because historically you were supposed to just enjoy these spices over a period of time. All right, let's get to our second ingredient. So I've done a lot of things with gingerbread and chocolate. A great thing to do would be to make a truffle, right? Basically take 2 parts melted chocolate, add 1 part cream to it, or just boil 1 part cream, put chocolate in it, switch off the gas, allow it to melt, mix everything together, add your gingerbread spice. When it starts setting down, just roll it into truffles or put it in the fridge, set it in a tray, cut it, dip it. So that's the gingerbread truffles. There is also the gingerbread hot chocolate that we're going to do today. We're just going to take melted chocolate, and I'll see if I have some lemon zest or orange zest. That would be a good addition. Let's not waste anything. And to this melted chocolate, we're going to add our Indian gingerbread spice mix. Now, while this looks like a lot of gingerbread spice added to chocolate, remember, you have to flavor an entire cup of milk with it. So the spice will eventually get diluted by the milk, so don't be stringent. If, however, you're making like a gingerbread chocolate bar, you'd reduce the quantity of spices. Here you are. Beautiful. Some lemon zest for freshness. I'm also going to add some orange zest, totally optional. Remember, less is more, just a little bit is good enough. So now this is something that could be made into sticks, it could be made into cubes, it could be just set in a tray and then broken and some milk added to it. It could also be put into your ice cube container, make it simple, something like this. Here. Right? And just set like that. And it just comes off. So all these pieces of chocolate, they just come off. So I have a ice cube container here. Here you are. So this can then go into the fridge and be kept like this for a really, really long time. You could make it in early December and your gingerbread hot chocolate is sorted. So this is what you get. Easy and simple. Yeah? Here you are. Now, 2 of these cubes for me works good enough for my hot chocolate, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to heat some milk. Again, this could be done with almond milk. This actually is excellent with oatmeal. If you have oat milk, it's fantastic. All these spices and oat, the earthiness of oats is a fantastic combination. Goes really well. I have a cup here. Beautiful. I'm going to add a little more gingerbread spice. The beauty of locking the gingerbread spice in chocolate is just the slow dissolution of the flavor of gingerbread into the chocolate. Now imagine this on a winter evening, sitting in your balcony. Knowing that one, it is good for the mind, the body and the soul, right? In Urdu we call it taseer, in English you can call it the effect of spices on the body, and that's exactly what's happening. You've taken warming spices, just balance them with a little bit of cooler spices like cardamom and fennel and star anise. And now we just, ideally you'd sort of leave it, give it its own time. And here you are. The beauty of it is that it can be done in advance. It can be done a fair bit in advance. So here you go. I mean, a festive recipe that has an essence of our understanding, Indian understanding of spices, to make this more festive, more relevant for the weather that we are in, more relevant for the harshness of the season that we experience, and yet be able to enjoy a recipe that's good for the mind, body and soul.
Thank you so much, Ranveer. That was such a wonderful recipe, and the best part is it's healthy. We can't wait to try it.
Well, thank you very much, Shraddha, and thanks to the entire Condé Nast team for using their platform and their voice for something which is as powerful and as beautiful as our ancient wisdom, and for enlightening people to their own inner power and the power of the gut. This was insightful for me as well. This is beautiful. Thank you.